The chair broke on a Tuesday. Not dramatically, not with a crack that echoed down the corridor. It simply gave one rear leg splitting at the joint, the whole thing tilting sideways like a drunk leaning against a wall. The kind of failure that had been coming for months. Anyone who looked closely enough would have seen it. No one looked closely enough. The boardroom on the 27th floor of Aldren Tower was full of people who were paid to look at numbers, not chairs. So when the leg split, and the chair tilted, and the man sitting 3 chairs down from the head of the table stood up quietly and walked to the maintenance closet at the end of the hall, no one watched him go. He came back with a wood clamp, a small bottle of carpenter's glue, and a folded square of sandpaper worn soft from use. He fixed the chair in 4 minutes. He did not ask permission. He did not announce what he was doing. He simply knelt on the floor of the 27th floor boardroom of Aldren Tower, the building that had his name on its original load-bearing calculations, though no one in that room knew it, and he fixed the chair. A woman in a charcoal blazer saw him from the doorway. She did not see a man doing his job. She saw a maintenance worker touching the furniture during an executive presentation. She saw a problem. Her name was Catherine Marsh. She was CEO of Aldren Capital, and she had not slept more than 5 hours a night in 11 days. She made a decision in under 4 seconds. It was the wrong one. His name was Daniel Osei. He was 44 years old. He stood 5 feet 11 in the work boots he wore every day, the same pair, resoled twice, the leather at the toe creased and soft from years of bending. He had a face that did not give much away, wide forehead, eyes that moved slowly around a room the way a person's eyes move when they are used to reading spaces, not faces, the kind of stillness that people sometimes mistook for slowness. He drove a 2009 Honda Accord with a broken passenger side mirror held in place with black electrical tape. He had driven it for 6 years. The tape had been replaced twice. He worked the morning shift at Aldren Tower, arrived at 5:47 a.m. every day, 14 minutes before the shift officially began. He had never been asked to come early. He had simply calculated once that 14 minutes gave him enough time to check the service elevator before the building filled up, and so he came early and had done so for 3 years without exception or comment. His supervisor, a man named Gerald who wore reading glasses on a chain and smelled of mentholated cough drops year-round, had written on Daniel's last review, reliable, quiet, no complaints received. He had meant it as a compliment. He did not know it was also a verdict. Daniel's locker was in the basement, level B2. The fluorescent tube above it flickered every 40 seconds he had counted, and he had submitted a work order to replace it 7 weeks ago. The work order had not been completed. He did not submit it again. He brought a small LED lantern from home and set it on the shelf above the locker. Problem solved. On the inside of his locker door there was a photograph, not taped, not pinned, held in place by the door's own magnet strip. A girl, maybe 8 years old at the time of the photograph, standing in a garden holding a sunflower almost as tall as herself, laughing at something outside the frame. Her name was Adiz. She was 11 now. She went to Millfield Elementary, 3 blocks from their apartment. She had her father's forehead and her mother's laugh and a condition called juvenile idiopathic arthritis that had been diagnosed when she was 6. The medication cost $412 a month after insurance. Daniel's maintenance job paid $19.40 an hour. He did not talk about Adiz at work, not because he was ashamed, because she was not something he offered to people who had not earned it. What the people on the 27th floor did not know, what Gerald did not know, what Catherine Marsh did not know, what almost no one in Aldren Tower knew, was this. Daniel Osei held a Master of Science in Structural Engineering from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, Ghana. He had graduated in the top 4% of his class. He had come to the United States on a sponsored visa 20 years ago and spent 6 years at the structural engineering firm Kellerman Voss Associates, where he had worked, first as a junior engineer and then as a senior project engineer, on 14 commercial buildings in the metropolitan area. Aldren Tower was one of them. Not the smallest one. The load-bearing calculations for floors 19 through 31, the floors that held the most lateral stress from the building's glass curtain wall, The floors where the wind torque at that height required a specific reinforcement pattern that the original architect had not accounted for. Those calculations were Daniel Osai's. He had written them by hand first, then entered them into the system, then checked them twice, then had them reviewed by a senior partner who initialed the page and presented them in the final structural report to the building commission. The senior partner's name appeared on the report. Daniel's did not. That was how it worked, and he had understood that, and he had not complained. Kellerman Voss had let him go during the 2016 contraction, not his performance, not his calculations. The firm had lost 2 contracts in the same quarter and needed to reduce headcount by 15%. He was junior enough to be included in that percentage, senior enough to feel it. His wife, Amara, had been sick by then. Not as sick as she would become, that came later the following spring, but sick enough that the gap between his severance running out and finding comparable work had begun to calcify into something permanent. He had applied to 11 firms, had 3 interviews, had 1 offer contingent on a work authorization renewal that took 7 months longer than expected. Amara died in November of that year. Adiz was 4. Daniel took the maintenance job at Aldren Tower in January. He had walked in, looked up at the building from the sidewalk for approximately 30 seconds, long enough to count the floors, long enough to remember the numbers he had written for floors 19 through 31, long enough for something to happen in his face that no one was there to see, and then he had walked inside and asked where to submit an application. He had been there 3 years and 4 months when the chair broke. He was good at his job, not in the way people mean when they say good to mean adequate. He was good the way a surgeon is good when he is performing work below his training, with a precision and completeness that the people around him registered as unusual without being able to name why. When a pipe fitting in the men's room on the 14th floor had been leaking for 2 weeks, he replaced the fitting and also realigned the bracket holding the supply line because the bracket angle was creating stress on the joint and would fail again within 8 months if left. He did not file a report about the bracket, he simply corrected it. When the crack appeared along the base of the east stairwell wall on the 9th floor, a hairline crack, the kind that maintenance workers note and pass along and which usually sits in a queue for weeks, Daniel had stood in front of it for a long time. He recognized the crack, not that specific crack. The pattern. He had seen that pattern before in documents and calculations, in the kind of thing that does not mean catastrophe yet, but means something is shifting that should not be shifting. He filed that report 3 times with photographs, with a note that said simply, "This should be looked at by a structural engineer." Gerald had forwarded it upward. It had been reviewed and marked non-urgent. Daniel said nothing more about it. He went back to the 9th floor and looked at the crack once more. Then he went back to work. He ate lunch alone, always at the same bench in the service corridor behind the loading dock. He brought his lunch in a scratched metal container, rice, usually with whatever he had put together the night before after Adiz was in bed. He read while he ate, not his phone, books. He carried them in the inside pocket of his work jacket, paperbacks mostly, their spines cracked and pages marked with small folded corners. The week the chair broke, he was reading a novel by Chinua Achebe that he had read before. The margins were already full of his own handwriting in pencil. He did not speak at length to anyone at Aldren Tower. Not unfriendly, not cold. If someone spoke to him, he answered. If someone needed help, he helped. But he did not make conversation, and he did not perform warmth he did not feel, and he did not pretend that the 27th floor was something other than what it was. He knew the building better than anyone in it. He knew its bones. He had helped design them. The woman in the charcoal blazer walked into the boardroom 30 seconds after Daniel began working on the chair. She stopped in the doorway. She was on the phone. She was always on the phone. Her assistant, a 26-year-old named Priya who had been with her for 18 months and had learned to read the millimeter-level changes in Catherine Marsh's expression with the accuracy of a seismograph, was standing 3 feet behind her with a tablet and a look of very controlled neutrality. Catherine watched Daniel for 4 seconds. He did not look up. She ended her call. "Who authorized that?" she said. Her voice was not loud. People who worked for Catherine Marsh had learned that she never needed to be loud. Daniel looked up, not startled, not deferential. "The chair is broken," he said. "I can see the chair. I asked who authorized you to work in this room. My job order covers building maintenance. Furniture is included." Not during active business hours in an executive space. Daniel looked at her, then he looked at the chair. The glue had been applied. The clamp was in place. He removed the clamp carefully. The joint needed 90 seconds of held pressure, which he had given it, and the adhesive would cure in 4 hours. He stood up. He was exactly Catherine Marsh's height, standing. She had not expected that. He did not fill the space the way maintenance workers were supposed to fill it, contracted, peripheral, slightly apologetic. He simply stood there and looked at her. "The chair is fixed," he said. He picked up his clamp and his sandpaper and his glue. He folded the sandpaper. He did this slowly and neatly. Then he walked out of the boardroom and back toward the service corridor. Catherine watched him go. The presentation resumed. She said nothing else about the chair. The complaint came from Marcus Webb. That is the thing that must be understood. The complaint did not come from Catherine Marsh, not directly. It came from Marcus Webb, who was Executive Vice President of Operations at Aldren Capital, and who had been in that boardroom, and who had watched the exchange in the doorway with the particular attention of a man who was watching for opportunity. Marcus Webb was 41. He had dark hair with gray at the temples that he had decided some years ago made him look distinguished rather than old. He wore cufflinks. He wore them every day. He had once told a junior colleague that you could tell everything about a man by whether he wore cufflinks, which was not true and which said something particular about Marcus Webb. He was intelligent, that is important to state clearly. He was not the blundering villain of a cheap story. He was calculating, patient, and accurate about people's weaknesses. He had watched Catherine Marsh for 2 years and had identified her single most exploitable quality, which was this: she was terrified of appearing weak. Not incompetent. Incompetent she could defend against with data, but weak, soft. The kind of female executive who her board already watched slightly for signs of excessive compassion. Marcus wanted her position. Not this year, perhaps not next year, but he was building toward it with the same long patience with which one builds toward anything worth having. He did not file the complaint himself. He called Karen Sims in Human Resources and mentioned in passing that he had been uncomfortable with the way a maintenance worker had spoken to the CEO that morning. He mentioned it the way one mentions a detail, almost offhand, as though it had barely registered. He mentioned that it had been in front of several junior staff. He mentioned that the CEO had seemed flustered. He used that word deliberately, knowing it would land. Karen Sims wrote it up. She sent the file to Gerald. Gerald called Daniel into his office that afternoon. Gerald's office was a room the size of a large closet on the B1 level. There was a desk and 2 chairs and a filing cabinet with a plant on top of it that had been dying for 3 years and would not die completely. Gerald sat behind the desk and looked at Daniel over the top of his reading glasses with an expression that said, very plainly, that he did not want to be having this conversation. "There's been a complaint," Gerald said. "All right," Daniel said. "About this morning, the boardroom." "All right. The complaint says you responded to a superior with insubordination." Daniel looked at him. "I told her the chair was broken." "It says you were argumentative." "I answered her questions." Gerald took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Daniel, I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm telling you it came from the VP level. That puts it outside what I can manage." "I understand. You're going to have to speak to HR. There'll be a formal review." He put his glasses back on and looked at his desk. "I'm sorry." Daniel sat for a moment. "Is there anything else?" he said. Gerald shook his head. Daniel stood, picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, and walked out. The HR meeting was the following morning, 9 a.m., a small conference room on the 6th floor. Karen Sims and a man from legal named Todd, whose last name Daniel never caught. Karen had the file open in front of her. She was 30-something, precise, with the expression of someone doing a job they had long ago disconnected from. She read him the summary of the complaint. He listened. When she finished, he said, "Is that everything? Do you have a response to the allegation?" "The chair was broken. I fixed it. I told the CEO it was fixed." The complaint characterizes your tone as confrontational. Daniel did not respond to this. "Mr. Osai, this isn't the first." "It's the first complaint in 3 years," he said, not quickly, not defensively, simply correcting the record. Karen looked at the file. That's correct, she said. What's the outcome? Karen looked at Todd. Todd looked at the table. We're recommending termination, she said. The room was very quiet. Immediate, Daniel said. End of day Friday, you'll receive your final pay and 2 weeks severance. Daniel sat with this for a moment. All right, he said. He stood, he picked up his jacket, he did not extend his hand. He walked to the door and he stopped and he turned back. The crack in the east stairwell on the 9th floor, he said. I filed 3 reports about it. It should be reviewed by a structural engineer. Karen blinked. I'll note that. He nodded once, then he left. He cleaned out his locker that evening. The lantern, the book, the folded photograph of Adiz. He held the photograph for a moment before putting it in the paper bag with everything else. In it, she was laughing. He did not know at what. He had not been the one taking the photograph, Amara had. He did not remember the day or the garden or the sunflower, but he remembered the sound that had come through the lens. He folded the bag shut. He went up to the 9th floor before he left. He stood in front of the crack in the east stairwell for a long time in the fluorescent light, one hand resting flat against the wall beside it, not touching the crack, beside it. Then he walked out of Aldren Tower. He drove home in the Honda with the taped mirror. He parked. He went upstairs. Adiz was with the neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, who kept her after school on the days Daniel worked late. He went next door and got her, and she was tired, and she held his hand all the way back down the hall. He made her dinner, she ate, she fell asleep on the couch, he carried her to her room. Then he sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop and began looking at job listings. He was very methodical about it. He did not tell Adiz for 3 days. He got up at the same time each morning. He drove to a different part of the city and walked, because the walking helped him think. He submitted applications online, maintenance positions, facilities management, a building coordinator role that he was overqualified for by approximately 20 years of compressed and uncredited knowledge. He called his contact at the city building authority about a position he had heard about through someone Gerald knew. He did not think about Aldren Tower. Except for the crack. He thought about the crack. 12 days after Daniel was fired, 3 things happened in rapid succession. The first was that a junior analyst named Sophia Reyes, 24 years old, 8 months into her first postgraduate job in Aldren Capital's Operations Review Division, was tasked with auditing the building's maintenance compliance logs as part of a routine vendor contract renewal. She was thorough, extremely thorough, in the way that junior analysts are thorough when they are trying to prove they deserve to not be junior anymore. She went back 2 years. She cross-referenced work orders against completion reports. She flagged discrepancies. She found Daniel's 3 reports about the east stairwell. She found the 3 times they had been forwarded upward. She found the 3 times they had been marked non-urgent by the Operations Review Committee, which, she noted, was chaired by Marcus Webb. She did not know what to do with this. She did the thorough thing and flagged it in a memo to her supervisor. Her supervisor was out. The memo sat for 24 hours. Then it landed on the desk of Thomas Vance, Aldren Capital's chief risk officer, who had a habit of reading everything that crossed his desk, including memos from junior analysts, which was unusual and was the reason he was still in his job at 61. Thomas Vance read the memo. He called a structural engineering firm. Not the firm that had originally built Aldren Tower. A different firm. He called them that afternoon. The second thing that happened was that the structural engineers arrived the following morning and spent 4 hours on the 9th floor. Their report came back in 48 hours. The crack in the east stairwell was the surface presentation of a more significant issue, a lateral shift in one of the load-bearing connections on the 9th floor's northeast corner, caused by a water intrusion event that had occurred slowly over 18 months, weakening the concrete around the anchor plate. It was not catastrophic. It was not imminent collapse. But it was progressing, and if left unaddressed for another 18 to 24 months, the connection would fail enough to require evacuation and remediation at a cost the preliminary estimate put at somewhere between $4 and $7 million. If addressed now, the fix was $80,000. The senior engineer on the assessment team looked at the repair specification and then looked at the chain of events that had brought her team here. She asked Thomas Vance when the original reports had been filed. He told her. She was quiet for a moment. "Whoever wrote these flagged exactly the right thing," she said. "The structural language in these reports, this isn't a maintenance worker's observation. Whoever filed this knew what they were looking at." Thomas Vance took the reports back to his office. He looked at the name on them. Filed by D. Osai, Building Maintenance Level B2. He sat with that for a while. The third thing that happened was that Marcus Webb made a mistake. Not a large one, not the kind that announces itself. He had been very careful and he was still being careful, but he was a man who believed so thoroughly in his own precision that he had stopped double-checking his own trails. Sophia Reyes had not only flagged the stairwell reports in her memo. She had flagged something else, a discrepancy in the complaint record. She had been cross-referencing maintenance personnel files as part of her audit, and she had noticed that the formal complaint against Daniel Osai had been submitted to HR not by Catherine Marsh, not by anyone present in the boardroom, but had originated from a verbal report delivered by Marcus Webb to Karen Sims. This would have been unremarkable on its own. Except that Sophia had also found, while checking archived building access logs for a completely different reason, that Marcus Webb had entered the 27th floor boardroom at 7:14 a.m. on the morning of the chair incident, an hour and 40 minutes before the presentation began and approximately 2 hours before Daniel arrived to fix the chair. The chair had been fine at 7:14 a.m. Marcus had been alone in the boardroom for 11 minutes. Sophia stared at this for a long time. She thought about the chair, she thought about the leg that had broken cleanly at the joint. She thought about the way old wood failed versus the way wood failed when a joint had been deliberately compromised. She was 24 years old and 8 months into her first professional job, and she understood, sitting at her desk in the operations review division, that she was looking at something that could end her career or define it. She saved everything to a separate drive. She printed one copy. She put the copy in an envelope. She addressed the envelope to Thomas Vance. She slid it under his door at 6:48 p.m. when the floor was empty. Thomas Vance found it the next morning. He read it twice. He sat for a long time in his office with the door closed. Then he called Catherine Marsh. Catherine was in the back of a car when Vance called. She was reading a report. She was always reading a report. She took the call with one finger still on the page, marking her place. By the time Vance finished speaking, she had set the report down. She asked him to say the last part again. He said it again. The car moved through traffic. The city moved past the window. She looked at it without seeing it. "Where is he now?" she said. "We don't know. He was terminated." A pause. "Find out," she said. She hung up. She looked out the window for a while longer. She pulled down the visor. There was a small mirror. She looked at her face in it. She did not recognize the expression she saw there. She closed the visor. Thomas Vance found Daniel's address through the HR files. He called the number on file, a cell phone, and it rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He left a message. He called again the next day, voicemail again. He passed the information to Catherine's assistant, Priya. Priya called. Voicemail. She texted. No response. Catherine Marsh, who had not personally traveled to retrieve anyone in the 4 years she had been CEO of Aldren Capital, said, "What's the address?" He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Sycamore Hill neighborhood. The building was a 5-story walk-up, brown brick with a row of buzzers beside the front door, half of them unlabeled. His name was not on the buzzer. Priya, who had looked this up, had the apartment number 3C. Catherine arrived at 8:10 a.m. on a Wednesday. She had taken a car service, not her usual driver. She had not told anyone where she was going except Thomas Vance. She was wearing a gray coat over her work clothes, no jewelry except a plain watch. She had taken off the silk scarf she usually wore. She did not know why. She climbed 3 flights of stairs. She found 3C. She knocked. Footsteps. The door opened. Daniel Osai stood in the doorway in a dark green sweater and jeans, holding a mug of coffee. He looked at her with the same unhurried steadiness he had turned on her in the boardroom doorway. As though the CEO of the company that had fired him appearing at his apartment door on a Wednesday morning was simply a fact of the world, neither surprising nor particularly important. Behind him, she could see a small kitchen, a table with school papers on it, a drawing pinned to the refrigerator with a red magnet. "Ms. Marsh," he said. "Mr. Osai," she stopped. She had prepared something to say on the way over. It had left her. "May I come in?" He stepped back. She came in. The apartment was small and clean and densely organized, the way spaces are when someone has learned to find a place for everything. There were books on 2 shelves and on one windowsill. Engineering textbooks, she noted, not maintenance manuals. She said nothing about them. She sat at the kitchen table because he gestured toward it. He remained standing. He put his mug on the counter but did not offer her anything, and she did not expect him to. "I want to tell you what we found," she said. "All right." She told him the stairwell, the reports, the structural assessment, the preliminary cost comparison. She told him about Sophia Reyes and the access logs and the boardroom on the morning of the chair. He listened. He did not react, not with satisfaction, not with vindication. He simply received the information. When she finished, he said, "Have you acted on the stairwell?" "We have a contractor beginning remediation next week." He nodded. "Mr. Oza." "Daniel." "Daniel," she stopped. "I owe you an apology. I made a decision without information that I should have had, and I let someone I work with, someone whose motives I should have questioned, direct that decision. That's on me." He looked at her. "I'm asking you to come back." The kitchen was quiet. From somewhere in the apartment, a clock made a sound. "I need you to understand something first," he said. "Name it." "My conditions." She did not flinch. "Go ahead." "I come back as a facilities specialist, not maintenance worker. Specialist. That title has different clearances and a seat at the vendor review table." He said this without emphasis. 18% raise from my previous rate. Benefits unchanged plus a dependent health care supplement because the insurance I had didn't cover enough of my daughter's medication. Catherine was very still. "The stairwell reports, the 3 reports I filed, they go back into the official record under my name. Not a footnote, the record." She nodded. "The person who manipulated the complaint process is addressed through whatever internal process applies. I'm not asking for a particular outcome. I'm asking for the process to happen." "That's already in motion," she said. "And one more thing." She waited. "The acknowledgement happens in the building. Not a letter, not an email. In the building, in the boardroom if possible, with the people present who were there when I was dismissed." Catherine looked at him. "Because that's where it happened," he said simply. "That's where it should be undone." She looked at the table, at the school papers. She could see the drawing on the refrigerator from here, a purple house with a yellow sun, the kind of drawing children make when they are learning that they can put their imagination into the world with their hands. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. She stood, she put on her coat, she moved toward the door. "The analysis," she said, turning back, "on the stairwell, the reports you wrote, the engineer who came to assess," she said, "whoever wrote those reports knew what they were looking at, structurally." He met her eyes. "I fixed the chair," he said. She stood there for a moment, then something moved through her face that was not quite the beginning of a smile. She turned and walked out. He went to the window and watched the car pull away. Then he picked up his mug, went to the table, moved Adie's school papers to one side and sat down. He opened his book. He found his page. He read. He called Gerald that afternoon. "I'm told you're coming back," Gerald said. He sounded relieved in the way people sound when they have been holding a breath they didn't know they were holding. "Seems so." "Different title." "Yes." Gerald paused. "The reports about the stairwell." "Yes." "I forwarded them. I want you to know I forwarded them." "I know you did," Daniel said. "I should have pushed harder." Daniel was quiet for a moment. We both know how that goes. Gerald made a sound. Yeah. I'll see you Monday. He told Adiz that Friday evening after dinner while they were doing the dishes. He washed, she dried. She was 11 and very serious about doing it correctly, holding each glass up to the window light the way he had shown her. I'm going back to work, he said. The building. The same one. She dried a glass, held it up. Is it a better job? A little better. Better money. A little better. She put the glass away. Good, she said. She picked up another one. He handed her the next plate. They finished the dishes. He came back on a Monday. Same time, 5:47 a.m., 14 minutes before shift. He wore the same work boots, Resoled. He carried a different bag, not the paper bag from the night he had cleaned out his locker, but a canvas one worn with the initials AO stamped into the strap in faded black, his wife's. He had kept it for years in the hall closet and taken it out that morning. He went to his locker. The lantern was where he had left it. Someone had replaced the fluorescent tube overhead. It was bright now, white and steady. He did not know who had done it. He set the lantern on the shelf anyway. He hung the canvas bag on the hook. He put the photograph back on the inside of the door. He went to the 9th floor first. The remediation had begun. There was a temporary partition around the northeast corner of the stairwell. The sound of work behind it, the careful, deliberate sound of structural work, measured and precise. He stood there for a moment. Then he went to work. His first act as facilities specialist was not dramatic. He walked every floor of Aldren Tower. He had walked them before as maintenance, but he walked them now differently, not with a clipboard or a work order, but with his own eyes and his own knowledge and the specific, bone-deep familiarity of a man who had once helped decide how a building would stand. He found 11 issues. Not catastrophes, details. A drainage seal on the 14th floor terrace that was beginning to fail. A ventilation return on the 22nd floor that had been installed at the wrong angle and was creating a pressure differential that would wear the system out a year ahead of schedule. On the 4th floor, a set of expansion joints that were not expanding correctly because a section of subflooring had been replaced incorrectly at some point. He could tell from the slight unevenness underfoot, could tell from the sound when he walked it, the particular quiet of concrete that is not quite at rest. He documented everything. Not in the complaint format, not in the work order format. He wrote a building assessment, 12 pages, clear language, specific locations with floor and grid coordinates, a priority ranking, an estimated cost for each repair and an estimated cost of deferred action. He attached it to an email addressed to Thomas Vance with a copy to Gerald and a note that said simply, for the facility's record. Thomas Vance read it that afternoon. He forwarded it to Catherine Marsh. She read it that evening. She sent one response, thank you. Marcus Webb was placed on administrative leave the Tuesday of Daniel's second week back. Daniel did not hear about it firsthand. Gerald mentioned it briefly, the way Gerald mentioned things he wanted acknowledged but not discussed. Heard about Webb, Gerald said. Yes, Daniel said. Hell of a thing. Yes. Gerald nodded, clicked his pen, that was all. The acknowledgement happened on a Thursday. 2 weeks after Daniel returned. The boardroom on the 27th floor, 10:30 a.m. The same people who had been there the morning of the chair, most of them. Some had been replaced in the intervening weeks. A few new faces. Catherine Marsh stood at the head of the table. She did not have notes. She said, most of you know why we're here. For those who don't, 18 months ago, this building's structural integrity was protected by 3 reports filed by one member of our facilities team, which were not acted on with the urgency they deserved. 2 weeks ago, we paid $80,000 to correct a problem that would have cost us between $4 and $7 million, and potentially an evacuation if those reports had continued to be ignored. The person who filed those reports was, before he joined our facilities team, a structural engineer with a master's degree in the discipline, and the load-bearing calculations for floors 19 through 31 of this building are in part his work. He was dismissed 3 weeks ago under circumstances that I am responsible for, regardless of who set those circumstances in motion. The room was very quiet. Daniel Osai is back with us. His reports have been formally entered into the building record under his name. I want to say this here in this room because this is where it should be said. She looked at him. He was sitting in the chair, the one that had been broken, the one he had repaired. He had not chosen it deliberately. It was simply the chair that had been nearest the door. She said, "I'm sorry." He looked at her. "Thank you," he said. 2 words, no performance, no magnanimity, just acknowledgement meeting acknowledgement. The room exhaled. Afterward, in the corridor, Sophia Reyes was walking to the elevator. She was looking at her tablet. She had been in the room, squeezed into the back, technically not invited but also not told to leave, which she had interpreted as permission. Daniel was walking the same direction. She glanced at him. She almost kept walking. "Mr. Osai," she said. He stopped. She said, "I'm Sophia, from Operations Review. I was the one who," she stopped. "I know who you were," he said. She blinked. "You do?" "Thomas Vance told me." She stood very straight. "I just did the audit. I'm just thorough, that's all it was." She stopped again. He looked at her. "It was the right thing," he said. "That's all that matters." She nodded once. Her throat moved. He started walking again. He had a meeting with the contractor on the 9th floor. She watched him go. Then she looked back at her tablet. She had a new task in her queue, lead analyst on the 10-year facilities review for Aldren Tower. She had been assigned it this morning. She had not asked for it. She had not expected it. She closed the tablet. She smiled, alone in the corridor, in a way that she was glad no one saw. Gerald retired 11 months later. At the small, slightly awkward gathering in the B1 break room, bad cake from the office supply store bakery section, a card that everyone had signed, he gave a short, rambling speech that was mostly about how the building maintenance industry was underappreciated, which it was, and how he was going to spend more time fishing, which he probably would. He thanked several people by name. He thanked Daniel last. He didn't say much. He just said, "The building is in good hands, better than it's been in a while, I think." He looked at Daniel when he said it. He cleared his throat. He retired to somewhere near the coast. The LED lantern went with him. Daniel gave it to him at the end of the evening, still in working order. "You might need it," he said. Gerald laughed. The facilities specialist role grew. Not in the way of promotions and title changes, not at first. It grew in the way that a person's real knowledge grows, quietly and without announcement, through the accumulated weight of what they actually know. Daniel began sitting in on vendor reviews. Then he began asking questions in vendor reviews that no one else in the room had thought to ask, and the vendors began answering those questions with a respect that they did not bother to conceal, because the questions were specific and the person asking them clearly understood what the answers meant. Thomas Vance recommended him for a seat on the Building Infrastructure Committee. Daniel accepted. He went to his first committee meeting in the same work clothes he wore on the floor, because he had not been told there was a dress code and because he saw no particular reason to dress differently. If anyone in the room noticed, they did not say so. They were too busy paying attention to what he was saying. He never raised his voice in those meetings. He never needed to. Adiz turned 12 in March. He took her to the building on a Saturday when it was quiet. The weekend crew ran on a minimal schedule and he had building access now at all times. He wanted to show her something. He took her to the 27th floor. They rode the elevator, just the two of them. She pressed the button. She was tall for 12, with her father's seriousness and something else besides, a lightness and openness that was entirely her own. He took her to the window. The city stretched out, morning light still low, coming in at the angle that made the glass buildings turn briefly gold before the day hardened into its working self. She stood there looking. "This building," he said. She waited. "I helped build it a long time ago, before you were born." She looked at him, then she looked at the building around them, the floor, the walls, the massive glass panels, the structural elements she could not have named but could sense, the way the building held itself upright in the wind. "Which part?" she said. He pointed not at the window, down, at the floor beneath them and the floors below that and the fundamental invisible geometry of the thing they were standing in. The part that holds, he said. She looked at where he was pointing. She stood quietly for a moment thinking about it, about what it meant to hold something up from the inside, invisibly, in a way no one sees. Cool, she said. He smiled. It reached his face slowly, the way warmth reaches cold stone. They stood at the window for a while. The city moved below them. The light changed. He did not think about the chair. He thought about the crack he had found, the one he had reported and reported again and reported a third time, and about the fact that it had been fixed, that the floors held, that the building stood the way it was supposed to stand, the way it had been designed to stand, because someone had done the calculations correctly a long time ago and someone had noticed later, when those calculations were being tested, and had said so. 3 times. That was enough. The building stood. That was enough. There is a photograph in the lobby of Aldren Tower. Small, not many people notice it. It hangs near the building directory in the kind of frame that is meant to be dignified without drawing attention. It is a photograph of the original structural blueprints for floors 19 through 31, specifically the reinforcement pattern for the curtain wall connections. At the bottom of the blueprint in small, precise handwriting, there are 2 initials. D.O. The photograph was not there a year ago. Thomas Vance arranged for it. He did not ask Daniel's permission, he told him after. Daniel looked at the photograph for a moment. All right, he said. That was all. He still arrives 14 minutes early. He still eats lunch in the service corridor, though he has a better chair now. Someone brought him one, left it there without a note, and he kept it. He still reads at lunch, same kind of books, same folded corner method, the margins fill up. He still carries his coffee in the same scratched metal container. He still says very little. But sometimes, when a new contractor comes in to review something structural, some specification or joint detail or load calculation that wants confirming, and the contractor says, the way contractors say when they have done their research, "Are you the OSI who did the curtain wall reinforcement?" He says, one of the people who worked on it. Not more than that. Because that is the true thing, and the true thing is enough. He goes back to work. The building holds.